Welcome, dear listener. I am the Nightmare Maestro, and tonight I bring you a tale of deception that will make you question the very foundations of trust. Have you ever thought you knew someone, only to discover a stranger wearing a familiar face? Settle in, for this is the story of the perfect roommate. A cautionary tale that might have you looking at your own living situation with newfound suspicion. Ashley's fingers hovered over the doorbell, hesitation etched across her face. The quaint suburban house loomed before her, its pristine white siding and neatly trimmed hedges a stark contrast to the knot of anxiety in her stomach. She'd answered the roommate ad on a whim, desperate to escape her cramped studio apartment. Now, standing on the porch, Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that this opportunity seemed too good to be true. The door swung open, revealing a smiling face that immediately put Ashley at ease. "You must be Ashley. I'm Carol. Come on in." The woman's voice was warm and inviting, her gesture of welcome so natural that Ashley felt her apprehension melting away. As Carol led her through the house, Ashley's eyes widened. Hardwood floors gleamed beneath her feet, the furniture a perfect blend of comfort and style. "And this would be your room," Carol announced, opening a door to reveal a spacious bedroom bathed in natural light. Ashley's heart raced. It was perfect, far beyond what she'd hoped for, especially at the surprisingly affordable rent. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "But surely there must be other applicants." Carol's laugh was light and musical. "Oh, we've had a few, but none that felt quite right. My roommate Jen and I are looking for someone who really fits in, you know. And I have to say, Ashley, I have a good feeling about you." As they chatted over coffee in the sun-drenched kitchen, Ashley found herself captivated by Carol's easy charm. She spoke of her work as a freelance graphic designer, her love of cooking, and how she and Jen had become fast friends since moving in together 6 months ago. "So what do you think?" Carol asked, her eyes twinkling. "Ready to be roommate number 3? Ashley barely hesitated. "Absolutely. When can I move in?" As she left that day, Ashley's steps were light with excitement. She'd found not just a new home, but potentially new friends. If only she'd noticed the calculating gleam in Carol's eyes as she watched Ashley drive away, or the way her perfect smile never quite reached those eyes. Weeks passed, and Ashley found herself settling into a rhythm of domestic bliss she'd never experienced before. Carol was the perfect roommate, always tidying up, offering to cook delicious meals, and seeming to anticipate Ashley's needs before she even voiced them. Even Jen, initially more reserved, had warmed up to Ashley's presence. It started small. Ashley could have sworn she'd left her favorite mug on the kitchen counter, only to find it neatly put away in a cabinet she rarely used. Her clothes seemed to migrate to different drawers in her dresser. At first, she chalked it up to her own forgetfulness or Carol's helpful nature. Then came the night Ashley jolted awake, heart pounding, certain she'd heard footsteps in her room. Moonlight streamed through her window, illuminating the empty space. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed her closet door slightly ajar. Hadn't she closed it before bed? One evening, as they shared a bottle of wine, Carol's usually cheerful demeanor slipped for a moment. "You know, Ashley, Jen and we've been through a lot. Life hasn't always been kind to us." Her eyes seemed to cloud over with a memory. "But we learned to be survivors, to take what we need to get ahead." She quickly plastered on her usual smile, but Ashley caught a glimpse of something hard and desperate beneath the surface. With trembling hands, Ashley reached for her phone, only to find it missing from her nightstand. Panic rising, she stumbled out of bed and fumbled for the light switch. The room flooded with harsh brightness, revealing everything in its usual place. Her phone sat on her desk, plugged in to charge. A thoughtful gesture she didn't remember doing herself. The next morning, Ashley mentioned the incident over breakfast. Carol's brow furrowed with concern. "Oh, sweetie, that sounds terrifying. But you know how vivid dreams can be sometimes. I'm sure it was just a nightmare." Jen nodded in agreement. "This old house does make some strange noises at night. I remember being spooked when I first moved in, too." Their reassurances should have comforted Ashley, but something about their synchronized responses felt off. Still, she forced a smile. "You're probably right. I guess I'm still getting used to the place." As the days wore on, Ashley found herself second-guessing her own perceptions more and more. The scent of her perfume lingered in rooms she hadn't entered. Her laptop's browser history showed searches she didn't remember making. Each time she brought up a concern, Carol or Jen had a perfectly reasonable explanation. "Oh, I borrowed your perfume for a date. I hope you don't mind. I meant to tell you. I used your laptop to look up a recipe when mine was charging. Sorry, I should have asked first." Their apologies were always so sincere, their explanations so plausible, that Ashley felt guilty for doubting them. Yet the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right refused to fade. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Ashley decided to tackle some yard work, hoping the physical activity would quiet her growing unease. As she raked leaves into neat piles, she became aware of eyes upon her. Glancing up, she locked gazes with an elderly woman peering over the fence from the neighboring yard. "You're the new girl, aren't you?" the woman called out, her voice carrying a hint of something Ashley couldn't quite place. Wariness? Pity? Ashley straightened, offering a tentative smile. "Yes, I moved in about a month ago. I'm Ashley." The woman's eyes narrowed, sweeping over the house before settling back on Ashley. "I'm Mrs. Callahan. Known the folks in this house for years." She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "Those two girls you're living with? They seem nice, don't they?" A chill ran down Ashley's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "They are," she replied cautiously. "Is there something I should know?" Mrs. Callahan's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not my place to gossip, dear. But let's just say you're not the first new roommate they've had. There have been others. They never seem to stay long." Ashley's grip tightened on the rake. "What do you mean? What happened to them?" The old woman shrugged, but her eyes held a warning. "Nothing bad, as far as I know. They just left. Sometimes in quite a hurry. It's probably nothing, but..." She trailed off, glancing nervously at the house. "You seem like a nice girl. Just keep your eyes open, that's all I'm saying." Before Ashley could press for more information, the back door opened. Carol's voice rang out, cheerful as ever. "Ashley, I made some lemonade. Come take a break." Mrs. Callahan retreated quickly, leaving Ashley standing alone with her racing thoughts. As she turned towards the house, she caught a glimpse of Carol's face, a flash of something cold and calculating that vanished so quickly Ashley almost believed she'd imagined it. With leaden feet, Ashley made her way inside, Carol's arms sliding around her shoulders in a gesture that now felt less comforting and more possessive. "Who was that you were talking to?" Carol asked, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. Ashley swallowed hard. "Just the neighbor, Mrs. Callahan. She was welcoming me to the neighborhood." Carol's laugh held a brittle edge. "Oh, that old busybody, always poking her nose where it doesn't belong. I wouldn't put too much stock in anything she says. As they sipped lemonade that suddenly tasted too sweet, too cloying, Ashley's mind whirled. The seed of doubt planted by Mrs. Callahan had taken root, and Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something vital, something dangerous. The following weeks brought a slow erosion of Ashley's sense of security. Small inconsistencies piled up like grains of sand, gradually revealing the shifting ground beneath her feet. She noticed Carol wearing a blouse that looked remarkably like one of her own, only to find her closet mysteriously reorganized when she went to check. Jen began using phrases and mannerisms that Ashley recognized as her own, as if trying them on for size. One evening, Ashley returned home early from work to find Carol hunched over her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. The other woman slammed the screen shut with such force that Ashley jumped. "Oh, you startled me," Carol laughed. But there was a strained quality to her voice. "I was just checking my email. My computer's on the fritz again." Ashley nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Later, she found browser tabs open to her personal email, her bank accounts, her social media profiles. When confronted, Carol and Jen exchanged a look before launching into a convoluted explanation about helping her set up better security settings. During a rare moment alone with Jen, Ashley tried to learn more about her roommate's past. "So, how did you and Carol meet?" she asked casually. Jen's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "We were in the same foster home as teenagers," she said, her voice flat. "Learned pretty quick that the system doesn't care about girls like us. We had to look out for each other." There was a bitterness in her tone that made Ashley shiver. Before she could probe further, Carol returned, and the moment passed. Their words made sense, but the explanations felt rehearsed, as if they'd had practice delivering them before. "Two other roommates?" Ashley wondered, Mrs. Callahan's warning echoing in her mind. Sleep became elusive, every creak of the house setting Ashley's nerves on edge. She took to wedging a chair under her doorknob at night, only to find it moved come morning. "Sleepwalking," Jen suggested with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ashley began to feel as if she were living in a funhouse mirror version of reality, where everything looked almost right, but not quite. Carol and Jen's perfection now seemed performative, their thoughtfulness hiding something darker. One afternoon, Ashley overheard a heated whisper argument between her roommates. "We need more time," Jen hissed. "It's not ready yet." Carol's response sent ice through Ashley's veins. "We don't have more time. The others never caught on this quickly. We need to accelerate the plan." Ashley's breath caught in her throat. She backed away, mind racing. What plan? What had happened to the others? And most chillingly, what did they have in store for her? Ashley knew she needed proof, something concrete to confirm her suspicions before she could confront her roommates or flee. With shaking hands, she began a methodical search of the house while Carol and Jen were out. The house creaked and settled around her, each sound making her flinch. Dust tickled her nose as she rifled through drawers and peered under furniture. The faint, lingering scent of Carol's signature perfume seemed to mock her efforts, a constant reminder of the deception surrounding her. Hours of fruitless searching left her feeling foolish and paranoid. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe. Her thoughts screeched to a halt as she moved a stack of books in Carol's room, revealing a hidden compartment built into the wall. Heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears, Ashley pried it open. The cool metal of the concealed door handle sent a shiver through her fingertips. Inside lay a trove of damning evidence. Driver's licenses with Carol and Jen's photos, but different names. Credit cards, passports, social security cards, all belonging to women Ashley had never met. The glossy surfaces of the fake IDs caught the light, a kaleidoscope of stolen identities. With growing horror, she realized these must be the others Mrs. Callahan had mentioned. But it was the final item that made bile rise in Ashley's throat, its acrid taste burning the back of her tongue. A detailed dossier on herself, her habits, her schedule, copies of her personal documents. The pages were cool and smooth in her trembling hands, the weight of them suddenly oppressive. And most terrifying of all, a half-completed application for a credit card in her name, with Carol's photo attached. The sight of it made her skin crawl, as if invisible insects were skittering across her flesh. The truth hit Ashley like a physical blow, the air rushing from her lungs. Carol and Jen were identity thieves, expert manipulators who had been slowly gathering everything they needed to steal her life. And judging by the collection of IDs, she wasn't their first victim. A floorboard creaked behind her, the sound as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. Ashley whirled, coming face to face with Carol and Jen, their perfect masks finally stripped away to reveal the predators beneath. The scent of Carol's perfume was overwhelming now, cloying and suffocating. Carol's voice was soft, almost gentle, a stark contrast to the cold fury in her eyes. "Oh, Ashley, we really wished you hadn't found that." Jen's hand moved to her pocket, the shape of something that might have been a weapon visible beneath the fabric. The rustle of clothing seemed deafening in the tense silence. "Now let's talk about how we move forward from here, shall we?" Ashley's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out of this nightmare she'd unwittingly walked into. But as her roommates advanced, faces set in grim determination, she realized with sickening clarity that her options were rapidly running out. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick and oppressive, as if the very house was conspiring against her. Ashley's eyes darted between Carol and Jen, her mind racing. The air in the room felt thick, charged with dangerous potential. She could taste the metallic tang of fear on her tongue, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I've already sent everything to the police," Ashley blurted, the lie tumbling from her lips before she could second-guess herself. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, high-pitched and trembling. A flicker of uncertainty passed between Carol and Jen. It was minute, barely perceptible, but it was enough. Ashley seized the moment of hesitation, lunging for the doorway. Carol's fingers grazed her arm, the touch electric and terrifying. Ashley twisted free, adrenaline lending her speed she didn't know she possessed. She thundered down the stairs, the pounding of feet behind her spurring her onward. Each impact jarred through her body, the old wood groaning under the sudden assault. The front door loomed ahead, her beacon of salvation. Ashley's hand closed around the doorknob, twisting desperately, only to find it locked, a keyed deadbolt that she didn't have time to open. The cool metal seemed to burn against her palm, a cruel reminder of her imprisonment. Panic clawed at her throat, threatening to choke her. She spun, searching for another escape route. The kitchen, the back door. It was her only chance. Ashley dove through the swinging door into the kitchen, her roommates hot on her heels. She could hear Carol's ragged breathing, feel the displaced air as Jen's grasping hands narrowly missed her again. The kitchen's bright fluorescent lights were blinding after the dimness of the hallway, momentarily disorienting her. The back door was so close, just a few more steps. Ashley's foot caught on the edge of the kitchen rug. The world tilted sickeningly as she crashed to the floor, the impact driving the air from her lungs. The cold tile pressed against her cheek, its antiseptic smell filling her nostrils. Before she could regain her feet, a weight slammed into her back, pinning her down. Carol's perfume enveloped her, no longer pleasant, but suffocating. "Nice try, Ashley," Carol's voice hissed in her ear, all pretense of friendliness gone. Her breath was hot against Ashley's skin, sending involuntary shivers down her spine. "But we've had a lot more practice at this game than you." Jen appeared in Ashley's limited field of vision, brandishing a syringe. The fluorescent lights glinted off the needle, mesmerizingly deadly. "Don't worry," she said, her tone almost soothing. "This won't hurt for long. And when you wake up, well, let's just say you won't be our problem anymore." As the needle descended toward her arm, Ashley's world narrowed to a pinpoint of terror. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. She squeezed her eyes shut, a silent scream building in her chest. The sudden ear-splitting wail of sirens shattered the moment. The sound cut through the air like a physical force, causing all three women to flinch. Red and blue lights strobed through the kitchen windows, bathing the scene in an otherworldly glow. The pulsing colors painted surreal patterns across the walls and floor, transforming the once familiar kitchen into something alien and terrifying. Red and blue lights strobed through the kitchen windows, bathing the scene in an otherworldly glow. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Ashley on the floor, Carol still pinning her down, Jen with the syringe hovering inches from Ashley's skin. Then chaos erupted. Carol's weight vanished as she scrambled off Ashley. Jen dropped the syringe, the glass shattering on the tile floor. Their voices overlapped in a panicked jumble. "How did they? We have to get out of here." "The back door." Ashley lay still, hardly daring to breathe. She hadn't actually called the police. This had to be a coincidence. A beautiful, life-saving coincidence. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the house as the front door was forced open. Heavy footsteps and shouts of, "Police, don't move!" filled the air. Ashley finally found her voice calling out weakly, "In here! Help!" What followed was a blur of motion and noise. Police officers swarmed the kitchen. Carol and Jen were wrestled to the ground, handcuffs snapping into place. An officer helped Ashley to her feet, wrapping a shock blanket around her shoulders as he guided her outside. In the harsh glare of police floodlights, Ashley watched as her former roommates were led to waiting patrol cars. Their perfect masks had crumbled entirely, leaving behind faces twisted with rage and defeat. A familiar voice caught Ashley's attention. She turned to see Mrs. Callahan speaking with a detective, gesticulating emphatically. "Just knew something wasn't right," the old woman was saying. "When I saw that poor girl running around the house looking panicked, I called you right away." Ashley felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She caught Mrs. Callahan's eye and mouthed a silent, "Thank you." The old woman simply nodded, a sad smile on her face. As the adrenaline began to ebb, the full weight of what had almost happened crashed down on Ashley. She sank onto the curb, trembling. A female officer crouched beside her, voice gentle. "We've been tracking this pair for months. Multiple identities, financial fraud, and we suspect much worse. You're not the first they've targeted, but thanks to your neighbor's call, you may well be the last." The officer continued, her voice somber. "We've pieced together some of their history. Both came from troubled backgrounds. Foster care, juvenile records sealed. They likely started small, petty theft, credit card fraud. But they've escalated over the years, perfecting their act." She shook her head. It's almost tragic. In another life, they could have used their skills for good. Instead, Ashley nodded numbly, watching as the patrol cars pulled away, carrying Carol and Jen to face justice for their crimes. The house that had once seemed so perfect now loomed behind her, its charming facade unable to hide the darkness it had contained. In the days and weeks that followed, Ashley would learn the full extent of Carol and Jen's deceptions, the trail of stolen identities and ruined lives they'd left in their wake. She would spend countless hours with investigators, lawyers, and therapists, trying to make sense of how thoroughly she'd been manipulated. But in this moment, sitting on the curb of a street she'd once thought would be her home, Ashley felt an odd mixture of terror and relief. The nightmare wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But at least now, she was awake. As the nightmare maestro, I must remind you, the most terrifying monsters are often born from tragedy, wearing the friendliest faces to hide their scars. Trust your instincts, dear listener, but also remember that behind every villain lies a story of pain. For you never know what darkness may lurk behind a smile, nor what twisted path led to its creation. Subscribe for more chilling tales from the Nightmare Maestro. Sweet dreams, if you dare to sleep at all.